everyone, it's Anna and I'm back with another vintage cookbook. This time I'm reviewing favorite recipes of Ohio meats. I found this book recently at a local thrift store, and as you know, if you've watched any of my other videos, Ohio is my home state, so I will cherish this one. This book was published in 1965, and the recipes come from women's club leaders in Ohio. See that. So it is one of those compilation cookbooks that you often see in small towns, churches, organizations where a whole bunch of people contribute their most favorite or best recipes. Often you will find 15 recipes for meatloaf, 12 recipes for beef stroganoff, etc., etc. Some of the people contribute the same recipe with slight variations, and you get to decide which one is the best. There's also a struggle between wanting to have a good recipe appear in the cookbook and not wanting to give away your most secret and best recipes. This book is mostly made up of recipes. There's not like a ton of illustrations in here. There's not a lot of pictures, not really any photos of how the food is supposed to look. So you have to use your imagination a little bit. But this book is divided into types of meat. So, we have beef, veal, and lamb, ground beef and hamburger favorites, pork, and one of my favorite categories, variety meats. What are variety meats? It's tongue and kidneys and liver and that sort of thing. I like that term that they use, variety meats. It makes it seem a lot more pleasant than organ meats. They open the book with things like abbreviations and measurements, terms and definitions for meat cookery, advice on buying the best beef, buying the best pork, that sort of thing. I think my favorite one though is in the fish section. In buying fish in the round, I don't know what that means. The following points should be observed to ensure freshness. Eyes, bright, clear, full, and bulging. Does that only apply to fish or is that for humans too? Gills, reddish pink, free from slime or odor. Scales adhering tightly to the skin, bright colored with characteristic sheen. These are all things you should look out for when you're buying fish. Very helpful. So getting into the recipes in this book, there's a whole variety of different ones. Poultry recipes, casseroles, even some salads, which I'll get into a little bit later. Some of them have pretty typical names, but some of them have gotten a little bit more creative. Holy Cow. Now that's a good name. So Holy Cow has ground beef, onion, green pepper, shortening, salt, tomato sauce, some canned mushrooms, chili powder, Worcestershire sauce, I'm getting better, salt, pepper, and then some spaghetti. So it sounds kind of like, it's just kind of like a meat sauce that you would eat with spaghetti. I happened to make another startling discovery when I was looking through this cookbook. Banana ham rolls. So since making my Chiquita Banana cookbook video, I have noticed there are a lot of other videos where people make these banana ham rolls with a little bit of variation. Sometimes there's hollandaise sauce instead of cheese sauce. Sometimes they're sort of put into sandwiches. What was the fascination with trying to put banana and ham together back then? It's not really something that I hear too much about now, and it was definitely not my favorite recipe. And this is exactly it. This is pretty much exactly the same recipe I used. I don't understand. Was there an abundance of bananas and an abundance of ham and they just needed to use all of them up, or they were very cost effective? I don't know. But it's not something that's going to be appearing on my dinner table anytime soon. There's even a section for wild game right here. I don't have a lot of experience cooking wild game. I do have some experience eating wild game. There's a nice little section here for preparing deer, frog's legs, rabbit, that kind of thing. Here is another recipe with a really great name, hillbilly. Not hillbilly casserole, hillbilly meatloaf, just hillbilly. Not something I've ever heard of, but here's what's in it. There's half a pound of macaroni, a can of tomato soup, a can of creamed corn, some cheese, shortening, ground beef, dry onion sliced. So I don't know what that means. That's not like dried onions, like dehydrated onions. It sounds like you dry the onions off and then you slice them, maybe. And then some green pepper. I'd like to know if any of you have made this recipe or heard of this recipe. Please let me know in the comments down below. It's a mystery. As I mentioned earlier, there is an entire section devoted to meat salads. This is the meat salad section. Some of those recipes are for things like sandwich spreads. However, there's a whopping 9 gelatin molds in this book. That is not something I expected from a book that is mostly devoted to meat cookery, but there it is. A couple of more recipes with eye-catching names. Ham whatnot sandwiches. I think this is mostly like a ham salad recipe. And also tuna tempties. This sounds kind of like a baked tuna salad sandwich with cheese. So kind of a tuna melt, but you don't grill it, you wrap it up and bake it in the oven. I would try that. I love a tuna melt. It could be good. Getting into the recipe that I'm going to be making for this video. Today I'm going to be preparing porcupine balls. No porcupines will be harmed in the making of this video. Some of you might know what these are. They're meatballs with rice inside, so they're supposed to look a little bit spiky when you cook them. I know that my mom has told me I have eaten these before. I just don't remember it. Sorry, Mom. This recipe appears in other cookbooks, including my beloved Betty Crocker Boys and Girls Cookbook that I really learned to cook from, but I just don't remember having them before. As usual, I will be cutting this recipe in half. So here's what's in porcupine balls. Ground beef, long grain rice, egg, milk, salt, tomato juice, chili powder, and chopped onion. So it sounds like a pretty basic meatball recipe with some rice added to it. That sounds like it could be pretty good, so I'm looking forward to seeing how this turns out. Let's get started. To begin preparing the porcupine balls, I'm going to be combining a pound of ground beef, a quarter cup of long grain white rice, so in that goes, 1 egg, still not one-handed, a quarter cup of milk, a half a teaspoon of salt. Now I could go in with a rubber spatula or a wooden spoon, but I think we all know that clean hands are one of the best kitchen tools. And when you're making meatloaf or meatballs, it's really probably your best bet for mixing. So I'm just gonna dive on in there. Yes, squishy. That's what this is. This recipe does have a little bit more seasoning than the one I did previously, so I'm hopeful that the flavor will be good. Again, no Worcestershire sauce in this one, surprisingly. Meat hands. I got meat hands. All right, I think this mixture is pretty well combined. Let me see if I can show you one-handed. That's what we got so far. So the next step is to roll these into balls, and then after that, I'll brown them at the stove. It doesn't say how large or small these are, so maybe a tablespoon. Let's do a tablespoon. I would use my 1 tablespoon cookie scoop, but it's still out of commission from my very first video. Okay, I think that's a good, fair size, like that. Not too big, not too small. This mixture is pretty loose though, so there's no breadcrumbs or oats or anything. I think that's sort of where the rice comes in, but it's not doing much to absorb the liquid since it's uncooked. Hopefully I can get all of these in the skillet. These aren't gonna be the most perfectly formed meatballs. If someone wants to critique these, that's their business. I never claimed to be an expert meatball chef. I typically don't make meatballs. I'm more of a meat sauce, like a bolognese kind of gal. It doesn't really matter what it looks like at the end if it's not perfectly round or anything. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get another pan. Even though I cut the recipe in half, like this is gonna make so many. I'm gonna have to freeze some of these for sure. Hopefully they freeze beautifully. I decided to go ahead and start browning that first skillet full of porcupine balls. And I'm gonna try to do the rest in this cast iron skillet. This is just a Lodge 12-inch cast iron skillet. It's my favorite one. I didn't mean to dirty 2 skillets, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do in the kitchen. I can see where this might be a really fun dish to make for kids with like the little spikes coming out of them if that's how they turn out. Haven't found that part out yet. This has to bake for an entire hour, so I went ahead and already preheated my oven just to save a little bit of time. All right, I'm gonna hop over to the stove and brown these and I'll be right back. I just finished browning my meatballs. This is what they look like. They turned out more like little flat patties. I'm gonna chalk that up to the abilities of the cook. I don't think it matters. I think they're gonna turn out just fine. I put them all in this casserole dish. Next, I'm supposed to mix up the sort of liquid sauce that goes on top. That is 2 cups of tomato juice, and then you mix in half a teaspoon of chili powder in, and half a tablespoon of minced onion. So I'm gonna go ahead and just like give that a little whisk. I guess I could get my little tiny whisk out, but that's not my thing, that belongs to someone else. I thought about baking these in the cast iron skillet in the oven. I wasn't worried so much about the high heat because of course you can put cast iron in the oven. I have heard that you shouldn't put acidic liquids or acidic items in your cast iron skillet. I don't know if this is true or not, if it's just something someone said and it stuck along the way. Hey, Mr. Cast Iron, if you're watching, can you tell me if that's true or if someone is pulling my leg? Thank you. Once that's all mixed up, you just pour this liquid mixture over your porcupine balls. I was a little worried about having to layer them slightly, but it looks like they're all getting nice and covered, so should be good. I do wonder how much of this liquid is gonna be left, if it's gonna really all absorb into that meat, into that rice, or if there's gonna be sort of like a sauce at the end of this. I guess we'll find out. I'm gonna put it in the oven and I'll be back in an hour. All right, we're out of the oven. Here is what we have. I will say these smelled amazing while they were baking and also browning. Dottie was very interested in that entire process, as expected. I baked these for about an hour, and when they came out of the oven, they were just kind of like a bubbling cauldron of tomato. I let them cool for 10 minutes so I could then give them a try. They smell super good right now, so I have some really high hopes for this recipe. I'm gonna go ahead and dish one up for myself. The sauce turned from tomato juice into an actual thick sauce. The meat itself gave up quite a bit of fat too, so I did skim some of that off. I'm excited to try this. Maybe I'll do 2. Let's splurge. Okay, well, I'm gonna cut into these and kind of look around inside first. It looks like the rice is cooked, but I'll find out in a minute when I take a bite. But yeah, these are nicely cooked through. Smells really good. Okay, I'm gonna cut a little piece and give it a taste. Yeah, these are really tasty. They're very juicy. They could use maybe just slightly more spice, but they're not bland at all. They taste really good. The seasonings consist of mostly just that salt and chili powder that I put in, but the tomato brings a lot of flavor to the party too. Yeah, I really enjoy these. It kind of reminds me of the beginning of like stuffed cabbage rolls or stuffed cabbage casserole. Just maybe like add a little cabbage to this and that's what you have. I wish they looked a little bit spikier. They don't really look spiky at all. Maybe they weren't supposed to. Maybe the rice is just kind of in there. Texturally, I wouldn't say that the rice adds a ton. It's kind of fun to look at. I mean, when you cut it open, I think I would make these again. Maybe add a little bit more seasoning to it, but otherwise I think it's a really good recipe. Overall, I think it's really tasty. I cooked a recipe from Favorite Recipes of Ohio Meats. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this. Do you have a copy of this book? Have you made these meatballs? I would love to hear it. Please tell me in the comments down below. If you like these videos, please hit the subscribe button. Thanks again, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.